Good morning. It's Tuesday, August 9th. It's 9 a.m. We have a full slate of commissioners. We got the clerk of the board and our administrator. So at this time, I'll call the meeting to order, and if you'd all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, the first item on the agenda is the approval of the July 26 meeting minutes. Any additions, corrections?
No.
Okay, then we'll move down to the vouchers.
We have two today. Move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $705,873.81 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Move for approval of salary clearing payroll and emergency management payroll in the total amount of $1,057,132.75 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Takes us down to consent agenda, two items on the consent agenda.
Move for approval of consent agenda items 1 and 2 as presented.
Second. Discussion.
There's been a motion and a second with discussion on the two consent agenda items.
I just wanted to offer the coroner an opportunity if he wished to make any comments about new equipment or improvements in his office. It seems like an opportune time to do that.
Thank you. So yeah, this piece of equipment that we're getting will actually save us some expenses, and it also allows us to more rapidly complete death certificates with toxicology. This piece of equipment will allow us to test for drugs in the blood. Within an hour, we'll have those results. And so that's a great upgrade in what we've been able to do. Currently, we send them to the state labs. We get those results back 90 to 120 days back, or to a private lab, which, you know, that incurs some more expenses there. Ultimately, we'll still send those to the labs, but we'll be able to send it to the state lab where it doesn't cost us anything. So we're glad to have that piece of equipment. Again, I think we're about one of the only on this side of the mountains, on the east side, that'll have that piece of equipment. And we're able to get it through the grant, called Coverdell grant. And so again, it doesn't cost us anything for our office. We will have some supplies that will eventually cost us monthly or annual cost, which that's already in our budget. So we're pleased with that, and we thank you for your approval of that.
Thanks for the comments, and I wanted you to come up and talk about it briefly just because it's a tremendous improvement in service from your office to the community, and it's not costing local taxpayers anything of consequence, just some supplies going forward. So it's a great example of leadership and management in your office, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Question?
thank you.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Will we be able to subcontract out and maybe with other
I've
surrounding
looked at
counties?
that, I've thought about that, and I'll see as we go along that each kit, so each sample, when we run a sample, is going to be about $25.
Okay.
And I've offered that to the other counties like Benton County and Walla Walla County.
Grant.
First, Grant. I was talking to Grant yesterday, and they weren't even aware of this type of machine, which surprises me that the other coroner's offices haven't been made aware of it. Yeah, that would, even Adams County, it's going to save time and money. We're really struggling with pathologists. I think I've mentioned before, now we're going to Spokane. Got an email Friday from Spokane. Now they're losing another pathologist. So again, we're on limited basis. We were up there yesterday with our 2 homicides, but it's just, it's a nationwide thing. And now we're finding one county or state will offer pathologists a better offer than what they're making. So they'll jump ship and go to another place, just like we see with our county going, you know, people leaving our county to go another county. So that's a struggle. So with this piece of equipment, though, it's going to help us cut down on our number of autopsies that we need to do, and so that will help us. And yeah, I've looked at that and exploring that avenue of offering it to the other counties, even law enforcement. If they have something that they want to have a quick result from, we could offer that option to them also. So
Good deal.
Great piece of equipment, and we're excited about it. Next week, they're going to be here to set it up and get us trained and stuff. So, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
All right, so we got a motion and a second for the 2 consent items. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Moves us down to the certificate of appreciation. The first one here is for Tony Bear. 6 years of service to Franklin County. Dear Mr. Bear, on behalf of Franklin County, I'd like to express our gratitude for your faithful service with the Franklin County Public Works Office, starting August 29th, 2016 through July 29th, 2022. Your contributions to the county and your years of service have been invaluable. Please accept this certificate of appreciation for your dedication and professionalism. We hope you know just how much we respect you and have valued you as a colleague. You will be missed at Franklin County. Thank you, Tony. Is Tony present? You're going to take it for him? Any other commissioners would like to speak on Tony's behalf?
Just want to say thank you for your for your time and service. Thank you.
And next we have Eric Wyatt. Dear Mr. Wyatt, on behalf of Franklin County, I'd like to express our gratitude for your faithful service with Franklin County Human Resources Office starting February 25th, 2016 through August 18th, 2022. Your contributions to the county and your years of service have been invaluable. Please accept this certificate of appreciation for your dedication and professionalism. We hope you know just how much we respect you and have valued you as a colleague. You will be missed at Franklin County. Eric, thank you very much for your service. I appreciate you even sticking around and helping finish things up. So I just want to say thank you very much. Commissioners would like to say something?
Sorry, Eric, I didn't want to speak in the middle of that, but I appreciate the fact that you took on the office after Carly Nave left, and I don't want to put any kind of a damper on the recognition of your contributions. I think you've been an outstanding servant. You've taken on some really tough HR challenges, some of them work-related, some of them political, and I just want you to know that I appreciate not only the fact that you stuck it out, but the quality of the work that you provided and the independent mind that you applied to the decision-making. While there were a lot of political pressures, I didn't see any of your decisions ever reflect that. It was always what was best for the county, and that's what we call character-based leadership, and I very much respect that. And I know that the coroner earlier made a reference to us losing people to other counties because they paid more, not with respect to your position and your departure, but a number of the people who have left have actually gone to other counties and taken pay cuts. And that's unfortunate, and it's an HR team that going forward will help us identify why those people are leaving. So I very much appreciate your service. Thank you.
Thank you for your time and service. I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. But thank you for your time here. I do appreciate it.
All right, with that, Keith, we'll move down to the Commissioner Administrator updates.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Busy week, a few things going on. Yesterday, there was a subgroup that had been formed from the Benton Franklin Mental Health Advisory Committee tasked with the responsibility of vetting applications for the 17th or final position on the committee. You might recall that the way this was structured was that Benton County had a number of appointments, Franklin County had a number of appointments, the same number, and then the committee itself, as chosen by the commissioners, would then appoint their final member. So that subcommittee met yesterday, discussed the applications, and have forwarded 3 candidates to the committee for review and approval at the next meeting, which has yet to be scheduled. So that committee is, the entire Mental Health Advisory Committee is on track to continue making some significant progress. I would note that we have received the first 2 months allocation, April and May, from our sales tax, the 0.1% sales tax that was approved last fall to go into effect April 1st. For the month of April, which we received in June, we received $232,140.76. That was a fairly substantial amount. Then again, in the month of July, we received the May amount, and it was $258,421. So roughly, $240,000 a month is what we're going to be showing right now. Obviously, it's a sales tax and is subject to the economy. If retail spending falls off for some reason, then we would see a reduction. But so far, we're seeing a very healthy amount coming in to deal with this very pressing problem of mental health and substance use issues, and getting a crisis facility in place and long-term care for those folks.
Question?
Yes, sir.
Is that the whole Tri-Cities, or is that just Franklin County?
That's just Franklin County.
That's just Franklin County?
Yeah. Benton County's tax did not go into effect until July 1st. There's about a 2-month lag from the Department of Revenue before they see that, so we don't know yet what Benton County is going to have. But just based on population and general retail sales tax information, it's going to be substantially higher than what Franklin County has. But until that first month allocation comes in, we won't know.
Okay, thank you.
Spent a little bit of time with both our attorneys in the prosecutor's office, as well as outside attorneys that are representing us in certain legal matters around some collective bargaining issues. That's taken up a little bit of time. Participated in WASAC's virtual gathering call yesterday. It was kind of a short one. As we noted, Eric Wyant is leaving HR office. We've also got some changes in personnel that we're anticipating out at the Happel Center. So we're dealing with some personnel issues right now, and recruiting and reviewing resumes and applications for those positions. Still continuing work on ARPA and plans for future program support outside of the immediate county business to support some organizational efforts that are qualified around utility improvements, particularly water and sewer projects in some of the North County area. I would note that we have a HVAC issue at the courthouse we're aware of, and they're working on it. Created a little bit of, I wouldn't characterize it as flooding, but water coming through the ceiling yesterday. Parts of the courthouse, that's been, at least the damage has been stopped, but we're working today on fixing that leak in the roof and the HVAC issues that are surrounding that. I would also announce that today, Franklin County has a new website. It's the same web link, but it has a new face and character. It looks different than what people are accustomed to. So if you go onto the website, you might be surprised. You may think you're at the wrong place at first, but it is the right location. It's a new, more functional, more interactive website. We appreciate feedback from the public on what that looks like, and if there's improvements that they want to recommend, we'd be happy to hear those. Then last thing on my list was reviewing plans for the Juvenile Justice Center remodel. Benton County is leading that effort. It's a building in their area, and there have been several proposals developed, and there's a committee that's reviewing those proposals now to make recommendations for a final proposal to come before the boards of commissioners. So with that, I think that's all I have for today.
Commissioner Peck?
It was a busy week there, Mr. Johnson.
Well, let me say I need to be out of the office a couple of days this week, Thursday and Friday, so I'm trying to get it all done before I leave. Thank you.
Before I talk about my week, I wanted to follow up on something you said. You were talking about the Mental Health Committee. Has there been any new information from Benton County or anybody else about where the mental health services might take place? There's been efforts, obviously, for months for Benton County to buy the old KGH building, and I know that was conditioned on limitations on certain activity. Have you heard any updates on that?
I have actually. When the Mental Health Advisory Committee met, they asked Benton County to revisit that question with Lords, who is the Lords and Trios, Life Point, I guess I should say, not Lords, but
Right.
Life Point, who is the holding company for both Lords and Trios, owns that facility, and Benton County has negotiated a sale. The seller had represented that they would not allow long-term care at that facility for mental health patients, and so Benton County began looking for a second location. That is still in progress. Benton County is purchasing the KGH facility and will use it for most of the services there. The representatives of Life Point have been contacted and asked that question if they would be willing to reconsider that limitation in the sales document, but so far they have said no, they would not reconsider that. That will be a condition of the sale. But Benton County is moving forward then with the procurement of that facility, as well as a secondary location for those long-term mental health patients.
Okay, thank you. That's exactly what I was looking to hear. So this week, preparation for the upcoming 2023 legislative session in Olympia through the Washington State Association of Counties, LSC, Legislative Steering Committee. We've got 2 meetings coming up where we will be refining the issues that we'll be presenting to the legislature on behalf of the 39 counties. If someone has a request or a recommendation for specific legislation or issue that they want addressed through the legislature, they always have the opportunity to contact legislators directly, but if they want to do it through the State Association of Counties, through the Legislative Steering Committee, feel free to send me an email or get in touch with me and let me know what that is so that I can share that with the rest of the LSC. Probably spent more time this week with the Council of Governments than anything else. We are going through a review of our budget and a salary review, and doing that for the entire organization as opposed to doing it on a piecemeal basis. And we're doing it as part of our annual budget process that is starting now. We put together a letter at the request of some of our member organizations. Again, it's the Council of Local Governments, so that would be the other counties and cities, asking us to write to our federal legislators regarding the removal of lower Snake River dams, and that letter has been produced and will be sent out to all of the cities and counties that are member of the COG signing on. It's a little different than most of the letters you see. It speaks specifically to economic impacts of reducing transportation opportunities on the Snake River, the impacts to irrigation, the shifting of freight movement from river to rail and trucks at a time when we're adding lots of trucks with Amazon and with Dairy Gold and with other activities, and then tying that all together with the recently enacted Move Ahead Washington plan that spends $15 to $16 billion over the next 20 years or so, but dedicates virtually nothing to the improvement and preservation of county roads and rural roads, the very same roads that our new truck traffic will be using. And if you take away irrigation and transit on the Snake River, you're going to add hundreds of additional trucks onto our roads that are, of course, already underfunded. So it ties all those issues together, and I think does it better than anything else I've seen so far. The Council of Governments is undergoing an audit for the previous year. It's a routine state audit, and we had an in-brief on that. And that's it. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen.
So had the Ben Franklin Transit Planning and Marketing meeting this week, and also we'll have a board meeting coming up this Thursday. Some of the items that's happening at Ben Franklin Transit is they're currently looking at transferring one of the vehicles into a mobile dispatch unit, and then also they are looking at the idea of forming their own police force. I guess my question would be, is when we were talking about reducing the 1/10 of 1% tax, they claimed that under their current projections that they would be bankrupt in 6 years. So my question is if you think you're going bankrupt, why would you want to start forming a police force? So again, that meeting, it will be this Thursday at 6. It's just a couple items that I think are worth taking a look at. Also had the Greater Columbia Behavioral Health meeting this week. And then also the Southeast Washington Aging and Long-Term Care Board meeting. And essentially with the long-term aging, we did give some wage increases just to ensure that we can retain the staff that we have, and things are going good there. Also with the planning and marketing with the Ben Franklin Transit, the van pool had taken quite a hit during COVID, but is slowly recovering back. Also attended the WASAC meeting, which was about the Department of Revenue's SAW account. So Secure Access Washington. So if you're beginning to form a new business, you can create what's called a SAW account, and that basically takes you through all the permitting processes. And it's like a one-stop, and it's a free of charge for business owners, but it allows you to make sure that you get all the permits done that you need, and it actually saves you quite a bit of time. I've used it myself, and it ensures that you get all the proper permitting for your business. So, and other than just meetings with constituents on some other topics, that's my report.
All righty. So before I get started, Keith, is there a time limitation on that sale agreement?
I believe they're scheduled to close around the 1st of October.
Oh, on the stipulation of long-term care?
No, it's a condition of the
Indefinite?
use of the property. So yeah, it runs with the title.
All right. Had the veterans meeting, and very good meeting. We're very close to getting a VSO hired. The person that was in the facility has already left and been hired by somebody else. So that's usually the way government works. We dally around and long enough, and they find a better job, they'll get going to it. So we're looking for a VSO for the veterans of our area. Ben Franklin Transit and Operation Maintenance, and yeah, Rocky Mr. Mullen hit on it. They're talking about being bankrupt, and they're going to form their own police force. It's some of the same stuff I've been dealing with for 4 years. It doesn't make sense. And we do have a new GM, Rochelle Glazier, and she seems to be pretty much on the ball. She's trying to get everybody back into the facility for meetings. One of them was doing his remote from Seattle, and she told him that she wanted him back in the office, and he says, well, I might have to quit, and she says, okay. She's pretty much a fireball, and I tell you what, we need somebody there that's going to be accountable for the waste that's been occurring over the years. So they're already looking at smaller buses for Franklin County. I think everybody that drives the streets sees the buses, maybe 1-2 riders, big diesel pushers, a lot of waste. That's pretty much what I had for a meetings this last week. So with that, we'll move down to the public comment. Is there anybody for public comment? Is anybody on the phone, Keith?
No one on the phone at this time.
Anybody for public comment?
George Dockstetter, South Landing Road, Franklin County. I got several comments. The police force for the Benton Franklin Transit, who in the hell are they? And how are they gonna operate in our county if you don't allow it? I fall under the sheriff's department and the police department, but I'm sure as hell not gonna obey some damn bus cop. Not that I'm gonna write it, but where are they getting their authority to operate in our county? And several other comments. And as far as ideas for Wasac, I think we all agree the roads are the #1 priority for almost all the counties. It doesn't matter where you travel in this state, which I do quite a bit, and the roads are junk everywhere, even on the freeways. Also would like to know where we're at with the lawsuit or the whatever you want to call it with the growth management deal with FutureWise. Where are we sitting on that? Did our urban growth boundary get approved as it was proposed, or where are we sitting on that, Keith?
It's on the agenda today.
What?
It's on the agenda today. There will be a long discussion.
Okay, fine. The other thing I want to bring up, since we're part of the mental health deal with Benton County, why don't we just tell whoever it is that runs them, go sell the hospital to somebody else? Who's gonna buy a used hospital of all that magnitude and convert it to something else? I don't see anybody out there. I've been in the real estate business for 46 years, and it's really gonna take an imagination to reconstruct that and convert it to a different use. And if they don't wanna drop the requirement, let's get them to lower the price. Let's get in there at a bargain basement. And the last thing I wanna talk about, I noticed on the agenda today, we've got some more reclassifications. And over the last 2 months that I've been attending meetings, we're reclassifying positions every week. Now, all that is to me and the people I talk to in the county is a mid-year pay raise. And I thought pay raises were handed out at the beginning of the year when we do our budget, instead of reclassifying people in the middle of the year just to give them a pay raise. That should be negotiated in their contracts or at the beginning of the year when salaries are set in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment?
Kelly Shadler. Every October, each county department meets with the commissioners to prepare a budget for the following year. It's been that way. We've done it for years. And it seems as though I'm questioning why we are bothering to do this if departments continue to come to you throughout the year requesting entire office reclassifications. This should be done during our budget time. I'm concerned with the appearance of favoritism county budget impact and morale of other offices who have managers who follow this fiscally sound budget process. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment? Nobody on the phone? All right, hearing none, we'll move down to the creation of a road project, 632 Taylor Flats Ringgold Road, presented by Mr. Erdman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chairman. The Public Works Department have brought 2 resolutions to the board. The first is to initiate County Road Project 632 for the Taylor Flats and Ringgold Safety Improvements Project. This project is combined from 2 safety projects that were submitted for funding through the Highway Safety Improvement Program. The project will widen shoulders and flatten slopes on Taylor Flats Road and install rumble strips, guardrail, and flatten slopes on Ringgold Road. The second resolution is for the approval of the required project prospectus and to enter into a local agency agreement with local programs to obligate the funding for the preliminary engineering phase of this project.
Okay, so questions? Questions, commissioners?
So I don't really have any questions. I'm familiar with the project and the funding source, and just want to take the opportunity to say thanks for keeping our obligations on track. The State County Road Administration Board, as you know, tracks the level of obligation at the counties. How much of the money we've been provided actually gets obligated to projects, and you're doing well there, so thought I'd just take the opportunity to point that out.
It can be a challenge some days, but
Well, a lot of the variables are out of your control when it comes to design, engineering, construction, contracts. There's a number of things, but if we get behind on our obligations as a percentage of the money given to us by the state and federal government, then we lose that money. And fortunately, that doesn't happen in Franklin County because you're doing a great job. Thanks.
thank you.
So it's a 10% matching. We got to do 10% to
Yes, I
match
believe,
this.
yeah, I'll have to look, but yeah, generally, that's how the safety program works. On some occasions, we can get 100%.
And the total cost is 1.8 million plus a little bit, and it is roughly 5 miles of road,
Yeah, so,
4.95.
yeah. So it'll be similar to what we did from Douglas Fruit up to Self Landing.
Yeah.
That's the first phase, and then we're in the process of hopefully having funding for Taylor Flats to complete that with a widening and overlay. And we'll do the same with this segment once it's done. Or at least that's the plan as of now.
Any other questions?
No questions.
You know, Greg, just to put a little extra light on it, safety improvements is pretty broad, but maybe just take 10 seconds and talk about sort of the bookmarks, everything from, I think, road crossings and signaling in Basin City to rumble strips to road improvements. The safety umbrella is pretty broad, and this is federal money.
Yes, and it covers a lot of things. In this particular case, we're going for slope flattening and rumble strips and guardrail. The idea with this particular safety project is we're trying, and there's been a big emphasis on this nationwide, to alleviate departure accidents when people leave the road. We're trying to mitigate that, try to keep them on the road. We know that if we keep them on the road, they're a lot safer than if they're off to the side. Other elements of safety money include, realigning intersections, our stop signs with the flashers, and our flashing stop ahead signs, and rumble bars and things like that are also part of that grant. And we've been, I think, quite successful with that. I think those have been a major improvement to our road system, and I believe we'll see in the years to come that our crash data will reflect their usefulness.
And flattening the hills reduces those occasions when people try to pass you in places where it's a blind hill. And
Right.
those accidents tend to be fatalities, so.
Yeah,
this
if we
is
can,
good
if
work.
we can't keep you on the road, we want to try and give you a soft landing.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, good job on getting the grants, and appreciate the work that's been done on that. Thank you.
Move to approve Resolution 2022-169, creating County Road Project 632 Taylor Flats Ringgold Road as presented.
Second.
Been a motion and a second for Resolution 2022-169. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you.
We have another resolution here. We have Resolution 2022-170.
Move to approve Resolution 2022-170 as presented. It's LAA CRP 632 Trailer Flats and Ringgold Road.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2022-170. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, Mr. Erdman. That'll move us down to the case EWG MHB case 21-1-005. Derek, Mr. Bratton.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a request to implement an emergency, a moratorium and declare an emergency in order to ensure the county maintains compliance with the growth management hearings ruling regarding the future-wise appeal of the 2018-2038 comp plan update and review and update. The primary decision that came out was there was a discussion where the FutureWise claimed that one of our designations regarding what we call Franklin crops in the 2008 comp plan were agricultural lands of long-term commercial significance, otherwise referenced as all tax. Therefore, they appealed our comp plan adoption that we adopted on June 1st, 2021, and challenged that to the Growth Management Hearings Board. The Growth Management Hearing Board accepted the petition for review, and on December 12th, we had, there was obviously all the legal maneuvering and various applications and counter and briefs and records submitted during that time. In the interim, held the hearing via Zoom on December 12th, 2021. And following that hearing, the Growth Management Board issued a ruling, what they call a final decision in order, or FDO, basically stating that they concurred with FutureWise's interpretation of what a Franklin crop was, and that we did not appropriately, what they call, de-designate. In other words, we didn't properly notify the public that we were taking an all-tac and converting it to something else. We disagreed with that interpretation. We have always contended that these lands were never intended to be considered as all-tax, and that they were primarily a planning designator, where we acknowledged that they existed, but the reason we called them out and differentiated them from the other all-tax properties was because we understood that due to their proximity to the city of Pasco and other, just primarily because of that proximity, that we were never intending them to be all-tax. Otherwise, the UGA expansion potential for the city just wouldn't be realistic, because they come, in fact, much of the city of Pasco is also Franklin crops, that soil that's beneath the city, as well as the donut holes. So that was always been our interpretation and our contention. We believe that they misinterpreted, therefore we appealed that decision to the appeals court. We are waiting for various pieces to come into place, namely that the Growth Management Hearings Board was supposed to provide us with a certified record. We, as of Monday, still had not received that. As part of the final decision in order, we had a compliance requirement. We therefore are utilizing this moratorium to acknowledge that we don't want to create a situation that is going to potentially be in conflict, but at the same time, we are not acknowledging that they're right. We're basically doing a standstill and allowing for any activity that was allowed under the AP 20 or the agricultural comp plan designation to continue. Things, though, that may have been allowing more flexibility with uses, not that there was really much, while we figure out exactly, well, wait until basically we find out whose interpretation the courts are going to support. We're hoping that the hearing will be before the appeals court sometime in December, January. However, we can't submit our brief until we get the certified record from the Growth Management Hearing Board, which we're still waiting on. So this is the moratorium, what it does is it allows for a standstill status quo status. Within 60 days, we would hold a public hearing regarding this matter. And then if we are still waiting for a final result and 6 months has passed, we would hold a second public hearing to determine whether we want to extend or move forward with other actions. So that's kind of the request. I'm more than happy to answer questions. Also, Jen Johnson's here to assist if you have legal specific kind of things that are outside of my purview regarding this.
How much time do they have to respond?
Ooh.
You said that you're waiting for the.
Well, we were supposed to get it a couple months ago. There were some
There's no time
things
limit.
going on. I don't, they're the Growth Management Hearings Board. They report to not to me, so I don't have control over that. What are they supposed to do? Yeah, they're supposed to expeditiously provide us with those. Sorry.
I think the question is, does their failure to provide that report in a timely fashion in any way negate their ruling? And the answer I think you're going to find is no.
Yeah, I would say no.
No, they keep asking for continuances. At some point, they'll probably get threatened with sanctions from the appellate court, but that's where we're at.
I have no other questions other than at this point.
Derek, Franklin Soils in the comp plan, the official record is identified as soil types 1, 2, and 3. It doesn't give much else in the way of definitions of what they are. Is there something else required in a definition? I see you smiling because you know where I'm going. That essentially defines an ALTEC, a lands of long-term commercial significance? Because that really seems to be the crux of it, is we used soil types 1, 2, and 3 and referred to them as lands that have long-term commercial significance, but we didn't actually label them. So it kind of comes down to, are they really ALTECs, or the fact that we chose not to label them somehow not make them ALTECs? In the case out of, well, we'll come to that in a minute.
Now, granted, I was.
And it's actually a two-part. Let me just give you both pieces up
Okay.
front. If you have a piece of farm ground adjacent to the urban growth boundary in the north side of Pasco, which essentially is what we're talking about here, is the mere fact that you expect the city to grow and to move into those current farmlands, is that recognition of the pending need for more land, is that enough in and of itself to say that these are not lands of long-term commercial significance? Or is that not an allowable consideration, and the determination needs to be made based on the quality of the lands, the viability, the irrigation, the soils?
That, appears to be a matter of interpretation at this point.
That's why I'm asking for
Yeah,
your
so
opinion.
Our interpretation has always been that, so what happens is the county at a particular point, and I apologize, can't remember if it was at 96 when we initially do it or if it's the next cycle, but there's a cycle where the county will go, these are all tax.
I think it was '08, but go ahead.
That's what I think as well. That's the record we're looking at, and that's the comp plan we're looking at. So the county will designate, these are all tax. If they're not designated as all tax, then they're not all tax. Now,
Well,
at that time of.
Forgive the interruption, but you're spot on right there. And the question is, under the law, not opinion, not your opinion, my opinion, Growth Management Hearings Board, but under the Growth Management Act and all the statutes that are listed, I didn't see anything that said specifically what it is that will determine. And so the question is that ultimately the discretion and the decision of the County Board of Commissioners? If we say it's an all-tax, it is, and if we say it's not, it's not? Or is there some other authority that overrules that?
That was my understanding of state law as well, and that the county has, what's supposed to occur is there's supposed to be local deference, meaning they're supposed to defer to our local interpretation and what we say unless there is a glaring violation of law or something like that. We read that section as stating that Franklin Crops we were calling out the fact that it has the same soil types often, but we're specifically saying these are all tax. And again, you can see that in our actions with the comp plan adoption, where we removed some acreage out of that final UGA because they had encroached into designated all tax. It was clear to us that that's what we were doing, and that Franklin Crops was a planning designator effectively. That we utilized that. Obviously, the first place you want a UGA to expand into is, urbanized areas, developed areas, things like that. You expand into a,
Well, that was one of the arguments, and that was the case out of Thurston County, which the Growth Management Hearings Board said didn't apply in this case because that statute only applies to designated counties and not Franklin County. So the fact that we didn't look first to infill in urban areas was a legitimate decision. Had it been in Thurston County, they would have been compelled or required to do infill. So that's not a hang-up. I think you guys got it right on that.
well, so we use that area to reckon, that the Franklin Crops basically is what I would call a secondary or a second tier. You only move into Franklin Crops when you don't have urbanized areas to meet your accommodation needs. We have an accommodation, or the city does, they need to accommodate 50,000 people over the next 20 years. They also hadn't touched the UGA really for over 10 years from what I recall. And in fact, they shrank it a little bit. But when that occurred, our paradigm and growth dynamics were completely different than what they have been for the last 10 years. So it was catch up. So there's a large body area. And again, but this all really comes down to whether we went through the proper process for notification regarding Franklin Crops, and we still challenge the fact that those are not all tax because we never designated them as all tax. The Growth Management Hearing Boards interpreted our comp plan as saying such.
Well, they actually pointed out that MAP 8 in the 2008 plan, which identified all tax in Franklin County, included, because the map was labeled, these are our all tax soils, and it included Franklin soils on that map. And I think that's where the confusion comes from, is because even though they weren't labeled as Altax, they were identified as soil types 1, 2, and 3, which are the characteristics for Altax. So is that, you
That's
think, where
their
this all stems
contention.
from?
Yeah. I'd say that that's pretty much their contention, because we put it on the map, but we also
Okay.
put roads on the map and some other
So-
things on the map.
Right,
just
so,
it was
so
on the
fast
map.
forward, in terms of a solution, if we go through the process now of saying whether these are aisle tax or not, we're going to go through the process to formally designate them as something, anything other than aisle tax. And if we go through that process over this 6-month moratorium, then that removes the only one essentially winning point that plaintiffs had before the Growth Management Hearings Board, because they dismissed a couple of their other complaints saying that they didn't have foundation or they didn't have standing or they didn't fit a statute.
Right.
So if we just do that, if we do this moratorium, we go through the process, we have public hearings, and we say, we don't think these were ever tax, but some people do, and so we're going to go through the process as if they were, have public hearings, de-designate, and then problem solved?
Yes. The reason I'm hesitant to say that is because, one, we would go through that process if we were deemed to be, basically we lose our appeal. Because again, we believe that our one, local deference, we said this is what it means, and you disregarded that. That's one thing. That said, staff will be putting this together, and we will launch that if the court ruling goes against us. But we believe that we have strong, in other words, I don't want to go and comply with the Growth Management Hearing Board ruling saying that we did something wrong when we didn't. And it does take a lot of work to do all of this. There's a cost to the county for the SEPA and all that, but we will get all that stuff laid out. We will have a draft resolution ready to go. If we lose, then we will move on that as soon as possible and then go through the process of notifying the public that these soils, as shown on maps or whatever, however we work that out, are now, because the court said they're all tax, then we're going to say, all right, they were all tax, and this is why the adoption of Title 14 was good, because it allows us to de-designate.
So do
in
we have
our
any
code.
idea when the court's going to make that decision?
Because of where we're sitting now, and we don't know, we haven't even been able to submit our brief because we don't have the record, and therefore, the FutureWise has not had an opportunity to respond. That takes about 2 months.
So
They're
you'd agree
looking
with
at
me that
December,
it's,
January.
then you'd agree it's unlikely we can resolve all this in the 6-month moratorium. We are allowed to do additional moratoriums, usually 6-month periods following this.
Correct.
I think a reasonable person looking at this would say, idealistically, ideally 6 months would do it, but I don't think it will. So then we're talking a year, maybe.
Well,
So the question is, just with that as a background, it sounds like we generally agree on that reality. Have we been talking with the port and the city to see what the impact is on them of that kind of a delay?
this only applies to county jurisdiction, properties under our authority and under our jurisdiction. It will
Well,
not-
I understand, but if we get this resolved and the UGA moves, then it does change development patterns and standards there, which does involve the city.
This is the growth into the county. It's going to be city, is what Mr. Peck is trying to say.
Right.
Well, initially, it'll be in the UGA, and until they actually formally move a city boundary, it is still county, and you're right about that. But the point is that the city is still going to be constrained in its ability to grow until the boundary actually moves. So I'm just wondering what, and it's a little tangential, but the city and the port are county partners, certainly. So I'm just asking if you've had any discussion with them about what the impact might be of 2 6-month moratoriums and a year delay before they could even consider adding any of that area to the city or to the UGA.
This action, the current action, now the de-designation thing, yeah, that will be coordinating with them, making sure on all that. This doesn't really affect their jurisdictional authority. It only refers to the property under our control.
So let me try again, because I probably didn't say it very clearly. Until the city boundary is moved, you're right, it's Franklin County, and it's our authority and it's our responsibility. But it still has impacts on the city and on the port. And the impact is that the ability for intermediate zoning will say, or for change of designation and development in those areas, those things will impact the ability for development to move outside the existing city limit, which takes pressure off of the city and the port that is already suffering a shortage of buildable land. And so the question was simply whether or not you've had any discussions recently with the port or the city so that they know what we're facing and that there's potentially a year wait here before any of this really moves forward.
I apologize. Yes, yes.
I didn't
Yes,
ask.
there is.
I was not very clear the first time when I asked it.
Yeah, they've been involved from day one with different levels of participation, and we do communicate with them as we're moving through. They've seen this. They had some questions. We've responded to those questions.
Okay.
So,
And part of that stems from the fact that both the city and the port filed and were accepted as interveners
Correct.
in this matter. So they have a legal foothold here as well. So.
Yep.
Okay, I'm sure others have questions, so I'm going to be quiet for a while. Thanks.
Commissioner Mullen?
I don't have any questions at this time.
So, Derek, this classification 1, 2, 3, this was implemented in 2008
correct.
with no consideration to the classification of ground by the Bureau of Reclamation? They have 1 through 6. How do we have 1 through 3 and they have 1 through 6? And without water, none of this classification means anything. Water is the lifeblood for this ground. If we don't have water, there are not crops that will grow. And without land, we can't grow. I'm wondering why we're even looking at a moratorium. We haven't heard back from them. Why are we making a step without their getting back to us? They're 2 months late?
Because that's the way the law rolls out. I have a compliance
But there's not been a
requirement.
court decision. Why are we doing anything? We move on with our plan until there's a court decision.
Well, there's a hearings board decision, which is
There's a
There's a
binding.
hearing board decision, but that's not a court decision. It doesn't have binding law
We are required to follow their decision until it's
because we're
over.
playing their game and
No.
we're in the Growth Management Act.
By law, we're required to follow their decision until there is a reversal in the appellate court. That's what the moratorium does. The moratorium is just our acknowledgement that we will not do anything until we hear back from the appellate court. We're required to.
And again, all this does is a standstill period and when you look at the actual regulatory changes that occurred before or following June 1, 2021, you'll find that there really isn't, like, we haven't modified our zoning since before then. So for our constituents and our residents, nothing really changes. It's not like being in the big change for them occurs at the time of annexation into the city. Up until that point, they pretty much still operate under AP 20 zoning. They can go for, rezone requests and things like that in certain areas, but at where these properties currently lay out, this moratorium does not affect, it maintains the status quo. And at this time, I don't have any applications or requests that would run into a problem with this moratorium under our jurisdiction.
So Derek, you're aware that as much as anybody in this room, that whether you're building roads or houses or hotels, that these are long lead projects.
Right.
And an additional year of uncertainty impacts that process for everybody. So there are definitely impacts. Point two, I don't think these soils were designated 1, 2, and 3 in 2008. That's merely map number 8 that was referenced in 2008 that showed Franklin soils in these areas. I think they were designated prior to your time and before 2008.
Yes. And then there's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and then you have the different soil types, various soil tables. And in fact, that's part of what, is that what we're doing right now? Yeah, because we're in the process of updating our CAO, our critical areas ordinance, as well as our shoreline master program. And some of that stuff is under review in that process too, but I'm doing what I have to do under the state laws. And that's why we're complying. But at the same time, we're not acknowledging that we're wrong. We're just acknowledging that basically we need to comply with the Growth Management Hearing Board ruling until such time as the court directs us otherwise. Because, for example, if we had not challenged it, it would have been the law for us, effectively. The reason it's still continuing is because we did appeal that decision to the appeals court. And that's what's keeping it alive, what's keeping it as a option still. Once I comply, once I go through the process of actual de-designation and various other things, one, that's an acknowledgement that their interpretation was correct, and two, it becomes Franklin County law.
If the appellate court holds with the Growth Management Hearings Board, we'll have to acknowledge that their long-term significance, and we'll go through the declassification at
Exactly.
that point. If it comes back and rules that they agree with us, then we can move forward and we don't have to do that. And with that
Exactly.
understanding, I'd move for approval of ordinance 04-2022 and understand that there may be additional discussion.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for ordinance 14-200, or 2022. Discussion.
Just point of clarification, I think it's ordinance 04-2022.
Oh, 04. Yeah, I need to get my glasses on here. Yeah, ordinance 04-2022. Discussion.
Derek, this is incredibly complex stuff. The time it takes to just read the dozen or so different RCWs that apply to this is pretty intense. So I want to commend you for your level of preparation coming in here, because I think you knew there were going to be a few questions. But this is a tough one. But I think that really the bottom line to the whole thing is we need to do something to establish our position until we hear back from the appellate court. This does that. This does not commit to agreeing with the Growth Management Hearings Board decision. On the contrary, it says we don't agree.
Correct.
And this buys us time to hear back from the court. And depending on what the court says, we either have to go, if the court agrees with FutureWise, then we have to go through a process to declassify these lands, which we can do.
Yep.
And if the court agrees with us, then we can move forward as if we would today if this wasn't in front of us.
Correct.
Okay,
So I'll
thanks.
get some questions, Derek. If we pass this declaration on a moratorium, we can't do anything for 6 months, and as Commissioner Peck, could be a year. We could be sitting on our hands for a year, is that correct? We're putting a moratorium.
You might want to consult Jen. I think you can rescind it at any time.
Oh, yeah. we
No,
can-
I'm saying for the decision to come out, you've had your discussion that it may be 6 months, it may be a year. So we're
Yes.
going to, on this, and believe you me, I abstained from voting on this because I knew FutureWise was going to sue us. I knew this. And when you get into this bureaucracy of this state, which is corrupt, we're playing this Growth Management Act game. We're allowing them to dictate our growth in this county. And they are dictating where we can grow. Where are we going to grow if we can't go that direction? Where are we going to go? Into the river? I mean, this is ridiculous that we're playing this game. We are Franklin County. We have a board of commissioners. We have a planning board of our own, and we're allowing them to dictate to us where we're going. If we do nothing, do we continue on and then we can start moving in the direction until we hear from the court? Because I don't want to put a moratorium, and I abstain from voting this, but I'm willing to defend the two commissioners that voted it in because I believe we have a good plan here for growth. If we don't go this direction, where are we going to go?
The Growth Management Act is a state law. I am bound to follow what the state tells me I have to do. Under the Growth Management Act, the Hearings Board has authority to do this. This is basically for Franklin County residents that are still in unincorporated Franklin County, life continues on as it did. The primary effect is applications seeking to deviate from what we call our AP 20 or agricultural comp plan designation.
Right.
But at this time, we don't really have a system set up that would allow for such deviations in the first place. I mean, it's AP 20, it's AP 20 up until such time as the city annexes the territory. At that time, it becomes urban, and it has the urban potentialities. The county has no say over those lands that have been annexed into the city. We have no jurisdictional authority. So for our constituents, the people that are in unincorporated Franklin County, things just continue on the way they've been continuing on with this moratorium. But what this moratorium does do is it helps bring us into compliance with the Growth Management Hearings Board such that we are not sanctioned. Because if you are designated or deemed to be out of compliance with the Growth Management Hearing ruling, then funding, state funding, and things like that can be held up for our roads and things like that.
You mean
until
they're going to
such
hold our
time as-
money hostage again?
They may. I can't say if they will or they won't, but they do have that authority when I found this out the hard way in Airway Heights. We were applying for something. It said, we're out of compliance with GMA. We're in the middle of waiting for whether or not the Supreme Court would hear our petition review for the appeals court decision. Found out, and what they do is they put you in this pile over here, and then when you come into compliance, they put you back in the list for the funding. Certain funds, though, do require compliance with the GMA, Public Works Trust Fund, I believe, and a few others out there. So that's another. What this does as proposed, I think, brings us into compliance, does not acknowledge that they're right, but at the same time, it doesn't interfere with some other things that we have going on, because they will.
And Derek, we have an August 29th deadline, I think, to respond if we intend not to comply, and putting a moratorium in place effectively does that pending the court action.
That's our belief, yes.
Yeah, because there was a compliance due date of August 1st. That's if we were just going to agree and roll over and do what they tell us to do. And we have until the 29th to respond back and say, yeah, we're doing this instead.
Yeah,
So-
well, we send this out, and then they have an opportunity as well to say, no, we need to do X, Y, or Z,
Yeah.
or tweak
And
this thing.
And that was from the Gross Management Hearings Board. They put that in their
Right.
decision. This is a timeline. I suspect that the minute that we went to the appeal and we're waiting for the appellate court to respond, I imagine it froze all those dates anyway. So I don't know that. It's a Jen Johnson question, but it's not critical to the decision here. I just wanted to point out that this really isn't something we can sit back and think about for a long time.
But we have the end of August, and I'm sure there will be some public comment on this before we vote. I'd like to hear from the public a little bit on this. I don't know what they feel.
There is a public hearing scheduled if you adopt this for October 4th. We do have to have a public hearing because this is an emergency. It must be within 60 days. But that would be at the time of adoption. And then, as Commissioner Peck stated, a moratorium can always be rescinded by the body that put it in place at any point in time. Staff's recommendation would be to proceed with what we have. And if at that public hearing for 60 days, it's a little less than 60 days. And then at that public hearing, if at that public hearing or following, the board desires to lift that moratorium or anything like that, it's always within your purview to lift the moratorium, just as it's within your purview to implement.
And a moratorium effectively immunizes us against any adverse action from the state, from the Growth Management Hearings Board, or even the courts until they make a decision.
Correct. We would be deemed to be in compliance because we are not creating a situation that is, quote, irreversible.
Any further discussion?
Nope.
No.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the passage of ordinance 04-2022. All in favor, say aye.
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 Let it be known that the chair is going to abstain from voting because of the convolution of this, and I don't agree with it being voted on today, so I would abstain. The motion passes. Derek, you're up again for planning and building position reclassification.
Okay, so.
Good morning, Commissioners. So the first item on the agenda I have before you is the request to reclassify the Planning and Building Services Administrator position. Essentially, Derek is requesting to reclassify the position from a grade 16 to a grade 17 based on kind of the increased roles and responsibilities, supervisory roles and responsibilities that position is performing. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have from a compensation standpoint. Obviously, Derek is by my side and can answer any questions as it relates to the structure and workload within his office.
Questions?
Are the duties changing for this classification?
They have changed. They've morphed. When we initially did the compensation review, the position was designed under an idea where they were basically just administrative staff. The reality has played out that they're not only supervising my admin staff, they're also training for succession. They supervise the building permit processing. They do training a lot more than what they used to do. Before, it was pretty much they were just doing finance, administrative stuff. Now, that position is responsible for ensuring they're the bridge between building and planning, for one thing. They move the permits through the process, the staff checks on contractors' licenses, various other things. That's all been part of the duties of the admin. But what the supervisor does is more, before we used to have what was it called, the senior planner? I can't remember the exact title, but I morphed those. I removed that, brought on planner 1, planner 2. I don't have, she acts also as my kind of right hand because that's what I do. I don't have a intermediate or a deputy. I have my building official and I have my admin or coordinator. Those act in my role to where basically it's like you're in charge of admin. That's your purview, that's your duties. You do the day-to-day operations. Buildings, the same thing with the building official. And then we meet and we discuss and, asset needs or whatever is going on. And we meet generally somewhat regularly to discuss department needs and stuff like that. So that position is now morphed into, I don't know if you want to call it executive, but that's not the right. She's my right hand. That position is kind of my right hand on a lot of things. So, hence the request.
So this was a necessary operate more efficiently and the job duties have changed significantly? Is that what I'm hearing?
The job duties from a job description standpoint haven't changed drastically. What I would say has changed is kind of the, as I understand from Derek, kind of the scope and responsibility of them. So previously, you know, this position, what would be what I would characterize as kind of like a lead type position, you know, supervising and being the lead over the kind of administrative support job duties within planning and building. And what it's morphed into is more of a kind of a senior level manager within planning and building for Derek, assisting with more higher level management responsibilities and being that kind of right hand, you know, assistant manager, deputy director type of role for him in conjunction with his building official. And I think that's where those have evolved. So this position's always been involved as, you know, whether it be sitting in on interviews or, you know, making, you know, recommendations, coaching, performance management, stuff like that with regard to employees, but it's broadened in terms of more staff within the office, and that's my understanding from him, kind of where that's evolved.
Just curious, we've had a number of these come up in the last few months, and I have each time pointed out that I object to the process of doing these out of cycle, that I believe they should be done as part of the budget process, a process we're about to begin. But once the first one was done, I was forced to change my position in that it's a choice between pushing for these to be done during the budget cycle and the alternative, which is once one has been done, you really owe the other departments equal opportunity. It's an equity issue. As much as I dislike doing them out of cycle, I don't want to advantage or disadvantage one department over another simply because of the timing of their application. That said, I don't recall significant changes in duties or responsibilities when we increased the grade for the commissioner's own clerk to the board. Do you recall any significant changes? Because it sounds like you're using that as a standard in this case that we didn't use previously. And again, I'm about equity and fairness for the departments.
I don't believe there was a change to the job description for that, that reclassification.
Okay, so then under the equity perspective, I'm not sure that that's really relevant in this case if we're going to treat the departments equally. In as much as I would like these to be done in the budget cycle, I think fairness dictates that we probably support it. But my question for you then would be, because we're so close to the budget cycle, from an HR professional perspective, would you recommend that we handle these today, or would you recommend that we slide these right into the budget process that starts in about 30 days?
I mean, as I've shared with you all privately as well, and I'll share it publicly today, I believe there needs to be a change to the compensation review policy to tie these, unless, you know, absent some extraordinary circumstance, to the budget process, in order for you all as a decision-making body to look at everything all at once and help, you know, kind of prioritize, you know, what are the priorities for the county. Absolutely. From an HR perspective, you know, my recommendation is to not, is to your point, is to, from a fairness standpoint, we've already kind of let the genie out of the bottle, if you will, to see these ones through, and then determine what's the appropriate point to kind of apply that that e-break, if that's what if the board is wanting to do, and determine where that's the most kind of fair and equitable spot to do that.
Eric, is this position a non-BART?
That's correct, it is.
It is a non-BART, okay.
So is this or is this not a increase in job duties and responsibilities?
It is from the standpoint of scope. So previously, this person was just kind of what I guess we characterize as a lead position. So, you know, being that kind of senior level support type of position, you know, kind of day-to-day supervisory duties, and as I understand from Derek, evolved more into as like a senior level manager. So while this position has always kind of supervised to a degree, it's the scope with which they're providing supervisory and management support. So the short answer is yes, there's an increase to the job duties. It's as it relates to the scope and responsibility of that kind of supervisory component of their job duties.
So what's going to happen to the position that's being vacated then?
It's not, it's a reclassification. So the request from Derek is to keep the job title the same, but simply to reclassify the position from a grade 16 to a grade 17. And so under county policy, since there is a change to the job duties that the position's performing, the occupant of that position would go to the step in the new pay grade that affords them an increase. Since there's that change, but it's not to add a position, it's just to reclassify it a higher pay grade, one pay grade higher.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
If there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion, if there's one.
I'll make the motion that we approve Resolution 2022-171 as presented.
I'll second for discussion.
There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2022-171. Discussion.
So Mr. Johnson tells me that the first scheduled budget meeting is October 25th, which is still obviously 2.5 months away. But the budget itself is already in the process of being formulated. As much as I would very much like to say enough is enough and this is the time to pull the emergency brake, I feel very strongly that the county as a whole entertains some of these out of cycle. And once we've done that, fairness dictates that we do it for the others. And I'll repeat something I said, I don't know, a few weeks ago, which is when you look at these things from a risk management standpoint, what's the upside, what's the downside? And here, our ability to attract and retain quality employees obviously is affected by compensation grades, these kinds of issues we're talking about. And our ability to pay these kinds of wages is predicated on how much our citizens are taxed, and there's always a balance there. And when the economy, eventually it will, I don't know if it'll be this year, next year, 10 years, I don't know. But when it does, like we saw in 2009-10, we have to start cutting. Those cuts and the impacts are going to be more severe as a result of inflating these without going through the budget process. Just my opinion. But I confess to being hung up on the fairness doctrine and not disadvantaging some departments who also need to attract and retain quality employees simply because they were either more judicious or not so quick to jump in and say, gimme, gimme. So I'll be supporting it on that basis reluctantly.
Is there any further discussion?
Well, in all fairness, I mean, if there's more responsibility and its job duties have increased, I mean, I would agree with it. I mean, nobody knows what the future holds, but I know right now you cannot hire anybody for anything. So I will support it.
All right, there's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2022-172. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Moves us down to the creation of a deputy prosecuting attorney, or excuse me, no, moves us down to the treasurer's office position reclassifications.
All right. So the next request before you is to reclassify a reorganization of non-management treasurer's office positions. So the request is to reclassify the personal property deputy, currently graded at a 14, to a senior deputy treasurer at a grade 16. Reclassifying the accounting specialist, currently graded at a 15, to an accounting investment specialist at a grade 16. Reclassifying the accounting assistant 3 to a accounting specialist at grade 15, and regrading the segregation foreclosure deputy, currently graded at a grade 14, to a grade 15. All these positions are on the courthouse salary matrix and part of that bargaining unit. But happy to answer any questions you may have regarding compensation, and I'll defer to Josie and Russ regarding kind of the structure of their office and the nature of the positions.
Eric, do you have a roll-up number for the total annual cost for all these changes combined? And I'm not looking for, the 2022, we have vacant positions, we have the money. I'm looking at for future budgets, what's the annual cost increase?
I don't have the number right in front of me. I want to say it was closer to, I think it was about 15 to 18,000, I think is what it was based on the 2022 COLA figure for those positions.
For all the positions combined on an annual basis,
Right.
15 to 20,000, including benefit load.
Correct. That's the loaded cost that factors in paid family leave, Social Security.
Okay, I've done the read-ahead materials and everything else, and for all the reasons I stated on the first one, I feel compelled to support this one as well for the same reasons, even though I do so reluctantly, and that's all the questions I have. Thanks.
Weren't these approved in the budget for 2022 already?
Yes, they were.
The funds were approved and set aside in contingency, and then it was on the condition that we do this reclassification work, because prior, there just wasn't enough time, I believe, prior to the submittal of their budget for 2022 for HR to complete that workload, and just given how things have
Yeah.
transpired, that we're
But-
getting to that now.
But the funds were not in the treasurer's budget. They were in the
That's
contingency
correct, and
fund.
so that's why the resolution reflects that budget transfer.
And that's one piece I kind of want to go on record saying, because there was some public comments earlier about budget process and morale of the courthouse and that. We went through the process that we have in place where we submitted it during the budget time, where we're here in front of the board. Myself and Josie, we went through each one of these positions in great detail. I mean, we're more than willing to do it again. But at the time, the turnaround time to go through some of these and rewrite the actual jobs, it just took a little longer than we anticipated. But we did go through the proper channels, I believe. We did go through the proper process. It's not a mid-year change. It was done in September of 2021. It's just this is the end result, final step of that process.
I have no further questions.
If there's no further questions, is there a motion?
I'll make the motion that we approve resolution 2022-172 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for 2022-172. I have one question. Are these non-BART positions?
No, these are in the courthouse bargaining unit.
They are, and of course, they were discussed and approved in our budget cycle. Is this going to put any type of a spin on our negotiations with union representation?
I mean, well, I can't predict the future. It, generally speaking, based on past practice, it shouldn't. So these positions that are requesting for regraded kind of fall within that grade 14 to 16 range on the courthouse salary schedule, and those particular pay grades within the courthouse salary matrix tend to be more specialized positions within each respective office, and don't necessarily have as direct comparators between offices. When you get below grade 14 on the courthouse salary matrix, that's when you do start having direct comparator positions across offices. That would be like your deputy clerks in the clerk's office, comparing with your legal secretaries in the PA's office, with your clerks in district court. And so if there were to be a one-off change to, say, one of those particular offices, there would absolutely be a ripple effect through the bargaining unit. And that's one of the things in the past with the union reps, where they've been, they've trusted our process to look at the bargaining unit as a whole and look at those comparators to ensure that there is that fairness and equity across the bargaining unit. And that was a concern that I did share with them about one of the positions that they did request reclassification, and based on both the market data as well as the internal comparators, where I could not recommend or support a change to that particular position for that reason. And so
And it's not in here, though?
No, it is not.
Okay.
So that is something we look at. Certainly if that we were to deviate from that process going forward, I do believe there would be issues with the union on that.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2022-172. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, that'll move us down to the creation of a deputy prosecuting attorney.
So again, this one is not so much a position creation or reclassification. I would characterize it as a designation. So it's a position that already exists within the prosecuting attorney's office. Just they've had, like everybody in this labor market, a difficult time recruiting, and certainly I'll defer to Jen on a lot of this because it's above my pay grade or knowledge or skill set. But I guess there are court rules that allow this particular designation to be applied to a deputy prosecuting attorney, which could help them with their workload while they look to find a more permanent solution or occupant for that position. But I'll defer to Jen on those details.
That's correct. So we have permission from the board, I think last August, to create a Deputy 1 position in our office. I think as of December, we were unable to fill it, so I think we got permission from the board to even bump it as high as a DPA 2, which is, I think, a level 20 or grade 20. We have still been unable to fill it. And if you recall, this position was one where it was partially funded by the Blake funds. So we have money out there. We've just absolutely been unable to fill it with a live body. And because of that, we've gotten more creative. Usually when we have trouble filling, we go up on the pay scale to attract somebody with experience. In this case, we've decided to start physically going to law schools to try to attract students to this position. So Mr. Stant's been able to do that. We have attracted 2 students, one that I believe is graduating this week and one that will graduate next August, to come in and start filling these positions. So we would raise them up, or you train them from the ground up in our office. So what we're asking for is a creation of a Rule 9 position. In our office right now, we have a DPA 1, which is considered the lowest 0 experience attorney, then a DPA 2, a senior DPA, and then the chief DPAs. What we're asking for is for that Rule 9. Under the State Bar of Washington, a student in law school that has finished at least 2/3 of their program can qualify for a temporary bar license. It allows them to operate as an attorney while they're finishing up that last year of law school. And then they can also be a Rule 9 between law school and passing the bar, which is the situation one of the gentlemen is that we wish to bring on. He's graduating this week and will take the bar in February. So between now and passing the bar in February, he can do all of the work that a DPA 1 could do in our office. The State Bar allows them to practice with a little bit of supervision in district court, like non-direct supervision in district court, or operate even in superior court under direct supervision. So really he can do anything in our office that a DPA 1 could do. So we are asking to create this position, and we did set it up to 2 different possible salary setups. we thought while we were creating this that we might as well set it up in the future in case we want to hire a law student. We are asking for anyone that is still in law school to be set on an hourly pay rate of $35 an hour. That is the same pay rate that Benton County has their Rule 9 interns on. However, once they finish law school, they do have the ability to work full-time. So at that point, we're asking to put them on the regular salary schedule as a full-time employee. It would be a grade 17, step 1, which is the lowest possible option for a DPA 1. Again, because they are doing the exact same work, we thought that would be appropriate. Additionally, we thought if we bring them in as a full-time employee, they start gaining the benefits, they start working on their retirement, there's more motivation to keep them here, for them to want to stay here. So possibly they won't leave for somewhere else if they've already got the ties in with their office, they know how to do things, they're already building up their retirement, they've got their benefits, etc. So the idea for this person is as soon as he passes the bar, the February bar, that he would then be reclassified as a DPA 1. So we're not using him as, a placeholder. He is our attorney eventually. He just needs to get to that qualification.
Are there any other tools available to help ensure retention of a Rule 9 that we have invested time and effort into training and bringing up, like contractuals or Eric is probably more familiar than I am with various HR tools to entice people to stay. Sometimes we do relocation allowances, for example, and if they stay for a certain period of time, then any payback is waived. If they leave early, they have to reimburse. Any tools like that that are worth considering? Or is it, do you think, just the experience and the getting started with benefits would be compelling? I'd hate to bring them in and have them go across the river and
I agree.
in March.
I agree, which is, we're obviously hoping that they won't, but I think it would be hard to hold them to any sort of contractual agreement that keeps them here, because we're not, if we were paying something, sure.
Sure,
But
okay.
we're not offering to pay anything other than salary. And I know when Ms. Nave was here, we had, trying to fill this position, had considered trying to do some sort of contractual agreement, moving expenses, or, if you stay here more than 6 months, you get this added benefit type thing, because we're getting pretty desperate. But I do think our current plan will have success. The individual that we're trying to recruit, or have successfully recruited, and hopefully we'll be able to hire as a Rule 9, does have ties here in Pasco. He grew up here in Pasco, a couple blocks from the courthouse.
Oh, good.
I think there's already strong ties here. He does want to be here, so I think adding this extra of making him a full-time salary position will help keep him here.
Are other counties having the same difficulty filling these positions?
All counties across the state are having difficulties. In fact, one particular county has lost half of their DPAs and is unable to fill it, and begging for volunteers just to get the basic workload done. So we're doing everything we can to create an environment upstairs that will attract and retain our DPAs, and I think we're doing a fantastic job, but this is a horrible job market across the state. And for instance, when I graduated, there was probably 50 law graduates for every opening in a prosecutor's office. Now it's the opposite. I've gone to state training and had supervisors of other counties openly or trying to poach our employees in front of us, So I walked away with a couple job offers that were made in front of Mr. Sant. One of our other DPAs walked away with 4 job offers that were made in front of me. So they're not shying away from stealing each other's employees. They're desperate. And so I think anything we can do to bring these starting attorneys in before they get other offers would be great.
Yeah, especially if they have local ties. There's added value, I think, in that. Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of Resolution 2022-173 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2022-173. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
Takes us down to the settlement agreement with Franklin County and IWAG Group for Pasco Landfill. Mr. Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you will recall, we received a briefing from the prosecuting attorney's office regarding negotiated settlement between Franklin County and the industrial waste user group at the Pasco Landfill. For the benefit of members of the public, the Pasco Landfill was owned by Franklin County, and during the post-World War II period until the landfill was closed in, I think, the 1980s. Is that right, Craig? Is it 90s, 80s?
It was in the
Last part of the...
late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah, anyway, some time ago, discovery of certain chemicals being stored at that facility that began leaching into the ground. You might recall that last month, the landfill sort of celebrated their initial cleanup of those industrial waste drums that were buried in the ground. This is kind of a phased cleanup approach, but under CERCLA and other federal and state environmental laws, Franklin County has not been able to completely avoid some responsibility. But this settlement that's being presented today puts Franklin County on a predictable path forward of what we're actually responsible for and what's going to be turned over to the other much larger businesses that are involved in the industrial waste group. So this limits our liability to about $600,000, which we will receive in a grant from the State Department of Ecology. So there won't be directly any county funds going to this. If they discover that cleanup exceeds certain thresholds, then there could be a possibility that we would come back to that, but nobody from the engineering or environmental community believes at this current juncture that will happen. And so given those circumstances, we felt like this was the best approach to put some certainty into our liability, predictability, as well as the fact that the county does not have to come up with additional money to complete our portion of the cleanup. And hopefully we can adopt this and then be able to move forward with those other groups.
Any questions?
So Keith, you mentioned CERCLA. I had to refresh my memory as to the acronym. It's been a long time since I worked on these, but this Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation Liability Act that other people commonly know as Superfund sites. I don't know that this has actually been labeled or identified as a Superfund site, but it's federal law, and the obligations under it are significant, and the potential costs are huge, and I just think it's a huge win for the county to have been able to work with the industrial waste group, the IWAG, and get Franklin County's obligations and liabilities reduced to what I think is remarkably minimal under the circumstances.
Yeah, that's correct. This is not a Superfund site, but that was the federal legislation that I had in my head. But it's actually, I think, the state's Environmental Protection Act and NEPA that are driving this. But it is considered a hazardous waste spill that requires to be cleaned up.
Okay. And if I recall, we have grant money from Department of Ecology that has already been committed to this effort. And again, that was grant money, not county tax dollars. And that by giving that up, our responsibilities going forward are largely limited to if additional cleanup funds are needed, we are obligated to go to the state and ask for more money, but we're not necessarily committed to actually produce money, but we just have to make the ask as the county government.
Correct.
Okay. At the risk of a bad pun, it's probably the cleanest exit from a landfill situation I've ever seen.
And again, I know I asked the question last time, but that money's already been, we've already gotten the money. We don't have to worry about being late on making that payment and paying the interest.
No,
All right.
it's been funded and being held by State Department of Ecology, who will submit periodic billings for that.
All right, thank you.
reimbursement.
And I'd just like to add that grant money is taxpayers' money, but it just is not all coming from our county. So with that, is there a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve Resolution 2022-173 as,
Excuse me.
oops, wrong one. Resolution 2022-174 as presented.
Second, discussion.
There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2022-174. Discussion.
I agree with the chairman that it is all tax money. I was just making the distinction that this is not solely funded by Franklin County taxes.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2022-174. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, with that, it's been a request for a 5-minute recess before we move into the next segment of the
Mr. Chairman,
meeting.
if I may, we are scheduling some time with outside counsel, and that is scheduled for 11 o'clock. I'm not going to have any additional office business other than that closed session, so you may
Okay.
want to take just a little longer break to
Oh, okay. We'll
give us
take,
time to set that up.
oh, yes. Do you want to do that before the break? Okay. With that, we'll move into our last segment of public comment and close that out. Is there anybody for public comment?
George Dockstetter again. Is this moratorium that you proposed nullify the annexation the city's done on the port property and the stuff up to Clark Road? So they're already annexed in, and they're out of whatever we decide to do going forward.
So the short answer is no.
Okay. The other thing is soil classification that future-wise considers prime farmland to be kept out. If you go into a soil conservation district, you'll find that over 95% of the ground that's in the annexation area is all Class 6. Because I worked with Dave McDonald and a couple of property owners out there that wanted to have their property brought in, and between the city limits and Self Landing Road, there was probably less than 600 acres considered Class 1 ground, and it's not in a straight block. It's in stratas going east to west and 200 to 300 foot wide in about 4 or 5 sections of that property. The rest of it, the Soil Conservation District, is all put in as Class 6 ground, which is considered marginal farm ground under their rules and regulations. And I would like to make sure that the public hearing on this is sent to all the property owners in that area in written form so they can attend, because not everybody reads the Connell graphic. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment?
Good morning, Commissioners. I received a call last week. Somebody asked me a question. I didn't know the answer to it, so I reached out to the Health Department. The question that was asked of me, if I knew they had heard that the Health Department was passing out $50 gift certificates to parents if they were to get their children vaccinated. And I found that very fascinating, and so I did follow up with the Health Department, and I was had a very good conversation, cordial conversation with them, and I was informed that yes, that is actually taking place. And I find that really concerning. And there was another topic, this Growth Management Hearings Board is another topic that brings this same thought to light, and that is that unelected bureaucrats are making decisions that the constituency has not empowered them to make. They've been appointed to a position, and they are spending taxpayers' dollars that we have elected you to decide how we spend. And so I'd like you to take into consideration that as you do these things. My understanding of this growth management hearings board decision and the consequences following that, you made the right decision this morning, I believe. But it's very interesting to me that we are empowering unelected bureaucrats more and more in our society, that they are deciding how taxpayers' dollars is spent, and they are, in a way, making your position as our elected representatives not as strong or not as effective or not as important, and that's concerning to me. Our society has a process that we've put in place that we elect people that represent our voice, and I've talked to two of you about this deal with the cards being given if you'll get your children vaccinated, and you neither one knew about it, and that's concerning to me. One of the big reasons it concerns me is not that I'm against the vaccination. I believe that in a free country, if you and your doctor feel that that's important for your health and well-being, that you should be able to do that. The part that concerns me is both the flu vaccination as well as the COVID vaccination are very easily attainable, very readily available in many, many areas. So this is a decision that people have made that they don't feel that it's right for them to do. And now we are openly attempting to bribe somebody for something that is already free to them. We're attempting to bribe them with taxpayers' dollars to convince them to go do something that they've already chosen not to do. And that really concerns me. So my ask to you is that you would represent your constituency well through these processes, and don't give unnecessary ability to those that are unelected for things that we have asked you to represent us on, and that primarily is the use of taxpayers' dollars. And so with this Growth Management Hearings Board situation that we have before us, continue to use your position as our elected representatives well, and you make the decisions on that, and on the deal with the cards being given to bribe people to get a COVID vaccination. I recognize I did ask the question, and it was confirmed to me that that was state dollars, but as was brought forward a minute ago, that is in fact taxpayers' dollars, and we are taxpayers. It was state money that was coming in to do that program, but I think it's very wrong to bribe somebody for something that they can already attain very easily, which is also paid for by tax dollars. So thank you for hearing me.
Is there anybody else for public comment? Anybody on the phone, Keith?
No.
Okay, with that, we got an 11 o'clock phone call. We'll go for a 5-minute recess at 10:53, so we'll be back in 10:58. Okay, it is, okay, it is, 5-minute recess is over. It's 10:59 and I'll reconvene the meeting. And Mr. Johnson, will you take us into the closed session?
Yes, thank you. We're requesting a closed session under RCW 42.30.140, paragraph 4, under contract negotiations. We'll plan on 30 minutes. We ask that the board, myself, the HR director, outside counsel Tony Mankey, and the clerk be allowed to participate in that closed discussion.
All right, it is 11 o'clock, so we'll be in closed session. We can come out. We're out of closed session. And now if Mr. Johnson would move us into an executive session.
So I'm going to request an executive session for 45 minutes under RCW 42.30.110, paragraph 1, subparagraph I, to discuss legal counsel, litigation, or potential litigation. I've asked the members of the board, the chief civil deputy, the clerk, and myself be allowed to participate in that.
Okay, we're going into executive session at 11:32, which will take us out at 12:42. Okay, we've come out of executive session. We're back into regular session. And that concludes our agenda. So with no further business, this meeting is adjourned.